Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to give you a shortcut to being, well, deeply informed on one of Europe's most critical economies.
And one that's looking increasingly troubled.
Exactly. We are doing a deep dive into France.
Right. And France is, it's supposed to be the linchpin of the eurozone with Germany.
Supposed to be.
But the sources we've looked at, they paint a picture of pretty severe economic stagnation. And on top of that, a really escalating fiscal fragility.
So for anyone tracking global stability, this is a big deal.
It matters immensely. I mean, the central tension here is that pressure is mounting for change, but decisive action is, well, it's proving incredibly difficult.
And some of the language being used is just striking. One source actually calls France one of Europe's darkest economies. What does that phrase even mean in this context?
It refers specifically to this mix of two things: really low growth and persistently high, and rising public debt.
Okay.
The health of the French economy is crucial, not just for its own citizens, but for the credibility of the entire eurozone.
Because if France can't get its house in order...
Exactly. If a core member like France can't manage its finances, it challenges the institutional stability of the whole continent. That darkness is really the shadow that this massive debt is casting over some very weak growth projections.
Okay, that clarifies the stakes. So let's unpack this. Let's start with the hard numbers that define the current situation.
Right.
Looking at the immediate slowdown, the real GDP growth figures are, let's just say they're worryingly modest.
Very modest. We saw 1.1% growth in 2023.
And the projections for 2024 slow right down, hovering around just 0.8%.
With only a slight uptick forecast for 2025. And, to put that 0.8% into perspective for you listening,
It's barely anything.
it's barely enough to keep pace with population growth, let alone improve living standards. So that lack of momentum, it immediately reveals these internal symptoms of weakness.
So how is that actually manifesting, on the street level?
Well, you're seeing it everywhere. Business investment is weak. Companies are holding back on spending because they just don't have faith in future demand.
Okay, so businesses are nervous. What about households?
Even more critically, household confidence is falling.
Hmm.
We see consumers becoming deeply pessimistic about their own financial stability.
And if you think you'll be worse off next year...
You save, you don't spend, and consumption is the engine of any domestic economy.
And all of this weak growth, this sluggish expansion, is happening while the public finance strain is just immense. The fiscal burden is the elephant in the room here.
It absolutely is.
Public debt is already above 110% of GDP.
And that's where the trajectory becomes really alarming. When you look at the European Commission's forecasts, they show the debt isn't stabilizing.
It's getting worse.
It's projected to rise significantly to 118.4% of GDP by 2026. This isn't just a high number. It's the direction of travel that signals deep concern.
What's fascinating here is how intertwined these numbers are with the political climate. The sources really stress this. You've got political instability, fragmented institutions, and they are actively complicating any effort to implement reforms. It's like you can't solve a math problem if the calculator keeps getting thrown across the room.
That's a great way to put it, because if there's no political consensus, even necessary spending cuts are just blocked, and that feeds right back into the debt trajectory.
So let's take a step back. Why is France, a major European player, facing these specific weaknesses? This doesn't feel like just a cyclical slump.
No, it's absolutely systemic.
Yeah.
We're talking about deep-seated issues here. The first major root cause is relatively low productivity growth. It's lagged behind peers like Germany for a long time.
And what else is dragging them down?
Well, you have two other key elements. First, an aging population. That strains the public purse through pensions and health care.
While shrinking the tax base.
Right. And second, there's a heavy regulatory burden. The sources point to complex, restrictive labor laws that often stifle business dynamism.
I can see how those factors combine. They lead directly to that high debt we mentioned. France has this huge public spending commitment, the famed French social model.
Which is very expensive and very politically protected.
So that high social commitment paired with low productivity, that limits their flexibility, doesn't it?
Severely. It means the country has far less room to maneuver if another economic shock hits.
And that lack of flexibility, that feeds into what our sources call the confidence and investment feedback loop. How does that actually work?
It's psychological as much as it is economic. Uncertainty about the government's ability to manage its debt causes businesses and households to just delay spending.
So businesses don't hire.
And households delay buying a car or a new appliance. We saw a stark example of this recently. Consumer confidence just dropped, because people's expectations for their future living standards fell. If you feel poorer tomorrow, you act defensively today.
And we also have to acknowledge the external forces at play here.
Sure, it's not happening in a vacuum.
What external headwinds is France really struggling against?
You have the legacy issues from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the energy price shocks. Those really hit industrial competitiveness. Plus, you've got ongoing supply chain issues and trade tensions.
All of which hurts exports.
It reduces that export momentum, making it much harder to generate the growth you need to escape the debt trap.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit alarming. Let's talk about the connection between that slow growth and the lack of fiscal room.
The danger zone.
Right. With growth near or below potential at that 0.8% level, France just lacks the engine to naturally reduce its debt-to-GDP ratio. The debt is growing faster than the economy.
And this raises a really important question about long-term sustainability. Because high debt isn't just a static number on a page. It actively costs money every single day.
Through interest payments.
Exactly. And the cost of servicing that debt is escalating rapidly because of higher global interest rates.
Can you quantify that? How bad is it?
The forecast is pretty alarming. Interest payments alone are expected to rise to 2.5% of GDP in 2025.
2.5% of the entire economy.
Just think about that. That is money that cannot be spent on schools, on hospitals, on the green transition. It's just lost to the past.
It's a huge drag on future potential, and to compound the problem, the political friction we mentioned is actively delaying necessary reforms. What are these crucial reforms that are being stalled?
We're talking about adjustments to the pension system, which, always meet massive public resistance.
Of course.
And deeper labor market reforms.
Yeah.
And also what the analysts call public spending rationalization.
Okay, let's clarify that term for our listener. Public spending rationalization sounds like pure jargon.
It's a polite term for finding efficiencies and cuts within the vast public administration. It means making the government machine run leaner.
And when those efforts are blocked?
Future productivity gains are just capped immediately.
And that weak outlook feeds back into what the private sector does. When the government's deep in debt and the politics are messy, what happens to private firms?
They underinvest. They see higher risk. They see potential future tax hikes. And this severely undermines future growth.
So it's a vicious cycle.
It is. You combine that lack of private investment with the debt trajectory climbing towards 118% of GDP, and you realize this isn't a temporary dip, it is a structural slide.
So if you are listening to this, why should you care if French debt hits 118%? Let's connect these big numbers to the practical impacts. Let's start with households.
For the average person, the risk is wage stagnation and reduced job security. And like we said, that fear prompts people to save more, which reduces consumption, which slows the economy down even further.
Promise of a better life starts to fade.
It really does.
And for businesses, especially the small and medium-sized ones.
They face huge investment hesitancy. First, higher government debt usually means higher borrowing costs for everyone.
Right.
And second, weaker domestic demand hits their bottom line. The risk of doing business rises, and the reward shrinks.
We also have to talk about the social contract. What happens when the government has less and less fiscal space to operate in?
Social strain increases significantly. If the government can't borrow cheaply, public services will face cuts, or taxes will have to rise.
Which is a recipe for social fragility and
political polarization, which ironically makes passing those necessary reforms even harder.
But the outlook isn't entirely set in stone. What are the potential turning points? What could stop this slide?
The first and most critical would be the full implementation of a strong reform agenda, genuinely boosting productivity and labor participation.
And once the policy is right, how do you get the money flowing again?
You have to regain business and investor confidence. That is absolutely crucial. It's about signaling stability and long-term commitment. If the private sector believes the government is serious, the money will start moving.
And what about a boost from the outside? A little bit of luck.
An external factor could help. A strong, unexpected export boom, maybe. But, given the current geopolitical climate, France really needs to focus on the first 2 points, the ones that are actually within its control.
So what does this all mean? Let's summarize. France is facing a serious trifecta. Slow growth, dangerously high debt, and political friction that makes fixing any of it extremely difficult.
And without timely and effective reform, the sources suggest the slide could accelerate.
Cementing that title as one of Europe's darkest economies.
And for you, the listener, These large economic outcomes absolutely connect back to your own world, especially if you invest in European markets.
So what should you be watching for?
Watch three key areas. First, how France manages its structural reform agenda. Are they actually passing and implementing laws that increase productivity?
Second, pay attention to its fiscal consolidation efforts. I mean, are they genuinely cutting the deficit?
And third, observe the investment climate. Is private capital actually flowing back into French businesses? Or is uncertainty still causing everyone to hold back? Those three areas will tell you the whole story.
Fascinating and quite sobering information. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.